digital forums. So, I mean, I think we did a great job, but to me, that was probably the single most important part of the mix of work that went into making this successful, was reaching into classrooms, reaching into school districts, reaching into community organizations, reaching into literally every corner we possibly could in Ohio, and making sure as many people as we could knew, stakeholders, 16 to 26-year-olds, wherever they lived, that we were creating something for them. Please come to this. We're sort of building this campfire. We want you to sit around it.
And we were working on the podcast at the same time, so we were able to get in front of the Boys and Girls Club in Columbus and make some of those relationships to help promote the forum as it was happening. And we got in contact with the State Department of Education, and they sent out, as part of their monthly e-newsletter or something like that, then they were able to share that around too, and it really helped boost the audience and get more exposure for it.
And Mark, you mentioned earlier kind of just about how you used the platforms that already existed, the social media platforms that already existed to promote, and that leads to the next Slido question. So it's like, how did you promote your content, and then how do kids know your content is out there?
Well, as someone in the earlier panel said, our teachers were our allies. So we did email blasts to every educational organization in the state and locally that we could think of, K-12, career tech, higher ed, you name it. And then we had them share with their networks. And a big boost came when the Ohio Department of Education picked it up and started promoting that too, because this was happening during the school day. We had to get the teachers to be willing to take that time during the day. We also focused on history teachers and social studies teachers who realized this was a great civics lesson, this is a great historic moment, and so I think they took the time and made sure that their students were able to participate.
Anybody else have thoughts?
We were able to get some teachers in Columbus to block off a whole afternoon for it, and they worked with teachers in the building to make sure their students could be there for the entire time, and it really helped, I think, as they got to hear from both candidates, and they didn't have to change classes and come in halfway through and kind of wonder, why am I seeing this right now?
Yeah, I wish that process was around when I was in high school. Like just a few years later, it would have been perfect. Yeah. But do you think that this collaborative effort would have looked different if you all hadn't been in the same state?
We would have had to have a different topic entirely.
Yeah.
Maybe a national topic, I don't know, or a Midwest, maybe it would be about the Great Lakes, or I don't know, a Midwest topic, something like that. But this was so specifically Ohio, which was also its strength. I think it could be done across state lines, but different topic.
We were actually involved in a multi-state collaboration for another CPB news innovation project. And I can tell you that picking the topic for the collaborative work that we did took a lot of work. So I think it's harder to do that because you're trying to anticipate what will resonate with and be relevant to people, in different states. I think it was a little easier for us because we all kind of knew Ohio pretty well.
Yeah, we had great success with our online news coverage for the election, and I've been trying to challenge my team. How can we find that topic that resonates just like an election? And that's been really tough to do. We're still searching for that.
Well, are there any final thoughts that you all would like to share about this whole process and anything that you've learned or anything else?
The only thought I have is that rather than an oak tree, it's got to be a buckeye tree, at least for the rest of the time here on the stage, because we're all
I don't know. My
Buckeyes.
First day in Ohio, it sounds like you said, I was standing under a buckeye tree, and I asked a neighbor, I said, so what is a buckeye? And he said, it's a useless nut.
A poisonous nut. Poisonous nut.
That's not the first time you've called me that, by the way. Actually, I'll leave you with this thought, and it's something that I didn't know for many years, and I lived in Ohio for a minute. Do you know why it's called a buckeye? Does anybody know why it's actually called a buckeye tree? Because the nut that falls from the buckeye tree, which never try eating it, I think it's actually poisonous. It's horrible. But the nut looks like a deer's eye. Now you might say, what? Well, Buck's deer, eye, and that's how it got the name. So for now, the oak is a buckeye.
Well, I saw a question on there was asking where they could find more information. WOSU.org/talkjobs has a breakdown of some of the video and a breakdown of the platform and some other stuff related to the event.
Say that link one more time.
WOSU.org/talkjobs.
All right, I want to thank you guys for joining us on stage.
Happy to do it.
Thank you to CPB, and that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Myles.
Thank you, Myles.
All right. Well, thank you to our colleagues in Ohio. And actually, Pat and I attended the event in Cleveland at ideastream. And I'll tell you, it's really cool to be present when something like this is happening in real time. So hats off to David and Tom and Kevin, who's not here, and the whole team that you had put this together, because it was not only impressive, but the reason we wanted to focus on it here today is so that it could be a guide and it could serve as inspiration for stations in the future. So thank you for that work. And we also got a recipe for Buckeyes from Mrs. DeWine, who passed out a cookbook to all the kids that were at the forum. So I haven't made them yet, but they're very good. They're very good if you ever had a Buckeye. So we are transitioning to our final session today. So this is key takeaways and ideas in action. And we can talk about our key takeaways, and we can talk about what we heard from my perspective, but we really want to hear from you. And we really want you to share what you heard, what you felt was, thank you, what you felt was inspiring or challenging or intimidating or just really hard. We just want to hear what you have to say. And I'll tell you, as we thought about putting this together, and we did this last year in Washington, and we kind of went through a whole theme of disruption and innovation and collaboration, and what does it take to change culture? What does it take to change? It's hard, right? It's really hard. And we're hoping that what we provided today, building on top of what we had last year, helps to make it a little bit easier. And I know that it's going to take work, and it's going to take people feeling uncomfortable at times, because you're going to have to do things you don't want to do, and you feel like, I don't know if I want to do that. But sometimes that feels good. So we want to hear from you. We want to hear those moments in time throughout the day. And we've invited Nat to come back on stage to facilitate this session. So with that, here is Nat. Are we sitting here?
You're going to stay up here, right?
Yeah, I'm
okay,
staying
okay,
up here.
good.
Yeah.
We're both facilitating this.
We're both
Great.
facilitating this. So I'm going to sit here. Okay.
We're sitting, okay.
I have a microphone.
Is everyone still awake? Yeah, good. We're almost there. So how do you want to do this? You want to take these questions, those questions?
Yeah, you want to start? You want to start with the first question about framing?
Sure. So I'll read it. Oh, you can see it. Target audiences can be reached through positive framing and challenges and opportunities relevant to each demographic. Focus on solutions rather than the crisis. So this is, I'm guessing, someone who came to the session, my master class session, and so we talked in that session about the importance of a concept called efficacy, which is kind of the balance to urgency and crisis, and the need to not only focus in our work on illustrating the extent of problems, but also that our duty is to present and explain solutions. So I'm glad that this was someone's takeaway. And there was great examples. So I thought that master class session was just, I was so impressed with everyone in that room and people's participation and examples. And there were great examples of individuals in that room who were making stories that were already doing the things that I was recommending, which made me feel decidedly less important, but were really impressive. Impressed me to see the things that you all were doing. So that's one of my takeaways, is I'm just kind of blown away by the quality and commitment of everyone's work in this room. I do quite a few talks, and the room rarely feels like this. So I think kudos to everyone in this room. That's one of my takeaways.
So I'm going to take the second one and I'm going to say it with the excitement that I think came with that post. This is such an interesting time to be media creators. Yes! I'm so glad someone wrote that, because it is an exciting time. You guys have such power with your ability to share stories, to tell stories, to connect with different people and different audiences. We want you to be excited to be media creators and to really look at this as an opportunity to connect to new and different audiences, to reach diverse people that you never had talked to before, and really look at ways to use your media talent, your media skill, to bring it to a conversation in the community and bring their perspective to everybody in that community. So I love that someone wrote that. Yay! It is an exciting time to be media creators. I'm really excited right now. It's the end of the day. I'm trying to be really energetic, so stay with me. Don't eat a Buckeye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm from Ohio, by the way. I've never eaten a Buckeye. No, I'm good with that.
The chocolate peanut butter kind?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see.
So I'll maybe point out an observation that kind of relates to the top one in blue. I keep pointing here, but I can't see when I'm pointing there. And really came out of Tim's presentation. So when we work with organizations on framing, we find it helpful to divide their work or to think about the work in getting ideas out for relevance as kind of having two parts. And I think Tim touched on both of these throughout his presentation, and I think the second one was really apparent in the last Ohio discussion, which is you have to think about what your framing strategy is, right? How you say what you're going to say such that it is relevant and it has impact and it has effects and it moves people. That's the first thing. And you have to think about how you actually mobilize that message such that it can get out to all the right people in all the right places and ways in enough time that it can have effect. And I think that everyone in this room where you sit, you have the, I guess it's an opportunity would be the positive way of saying it, the responsibility or the obligation would be slightly less positive ways of saying it, of doing both of those things. You can't just have awesome frames and not think about how they go out, and you can't just put out stuff that's not awesomely framed. So I think kind of that realization is helpful in my thinking about kind of everything that you're up against and all that you have to do if you're going to put some of these ideas that we've talked about into practice. And I thought that Ohio session was just a fantastic example of the second part of that. So how you come up with really great collaborative, resonant ways of taking ideas and getting them out to new audiences in engaging ways. And so I thought that was just a fantastically impressive example of that.
Some of the points that were up here went because other people are voting. Bless and release. That seems to be popular. It has 9 thumbs up. So I will comment that it's a very popular statement that you have that you have here. I think it's this whole day and this whole conversation again is about change. It's about leadership. It's about really kind of digging deeper and saying, what is it that we can do? And there was a point up here that has now been lost on the bottom, but it talked a little bit about, when you're connecting with different audiences, the approach is going to be different, right? So if you're connecting with young people versus teachers versus parents of young kids versus, right, they're all going to be different. And I think the challenge that we have is to figure out, and you have locally, to say, okay, where is our greatest opportunity? Where do we see the greatest need? Where do we see our skill and our ability to be leveraged to help meet that need? So it might take different approaches for different audiences because there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. But as you kind of go into your community and learn more about these issues, I think you'll come to some conclusions about what may be possible with some versus others.
So I want to, if it's okay to follow up on that point, I do a lot of thinking on this idea of kind of we need a different story for left-handed Lithuanians in Kansas than we need for people in Portland, Oregon who drink extra hot lattes. Like there's some, that's a bit of a joke and no one's laughing at it, but I'm being dramatic there. Like it's true that we need different strategies for different audiences, but you can also see the danger in what I've just said. So one of your incredible kind of sources of power, I would argue, and this is going to be a little bit provocative, is that you have the ability to amplify common messages. Like, that's amazing. That's how you change culture. That's the only way to change culture, I would argue. So the trick is in finding the balance or the sweet spot between some really big, powerful, resonant master frames that you can all push out through your work, but also telling the stories that kind of come out of those frames in ways that do resonate and are authentic and particular to specific audiences. So I think it's a danger of thinking that we need, completely different strategies for this and that audience or that demographic or this or that segment, because I think when we do that, we actually splinter our effects and rob ourselves of one of our biggest kind of strategic opportunities. And then instead, we have to actually do the harder work of finding the balance between those two things. And I would encourage us going forward, I mean, we're not going to do this at this point in the day, but what are the big master frames, meta ideas, overarching narratives that come out of this discussion today? There are some that you all can kind of buy into and share and use your work to amplify and not dilute the effect of your assets, of your reach, of your power.
Do we have, no, Michael's saying no to me. I was going to say, do we have microphones? Because it would be really nice. We've got about 10, 15 more minutes. What?
We have mics.
Okay.
No one is willing to stand up.
Oh, come on. You know what? I will say, I had a number of you, and I'm not going to call you out, but if I have to, I will, come up to me during breaks or different parts of the day to comment about what you heard and what you liked and what was important. And I know that you're out there, and I know that you have something to say. Thank you, John Rubin. You were one of them. I'm
Certainly.
so glad.
Well, my comment was forming about the courage and boldness of our speakers. I was just sort of exercising that a little bit myself. But no, I just was saying how, just noticing how all the speakers took on some of the most challenging issues of our time and really asked us to step up and gave us some really cool tools to use to take those on in really constructive ways. So I just really appreciate that. That's a takeaway, that sort of synthesizing some of my takeaways. That's a theme that resonated for me, and I thank all the speakers for doing that and putting a charge or order to us from the Colonel last night. But and thanks for the tools to do that. So much appreciated to all of them.
Anyone else?
I don't. Oh, there we go.
Hi, Tanya Crum from KET in Kentucky. I was just going to say how encouraging it is for all of us to be reminded that we've got to get outside of our own stations, of our own thinking, of our own ways we've always done things. And I think we all have the best heart and the best thoughts about our mission, but I think the reminder to really hear from those that are the underserved, that need our services more than most, is really an encouraging thing for us to do.
Thanks, Tanya.
Allison Hunter, WOUB Public Media in Athens, Ohio. Please give. What just kind of rolls off the tongue. What I appreciated most was Nina Simon's talk, and that whole idea of coming from an asset base instead of need-based when you're talking about collaborating with people, kind of to piggyback on what was just said, because we don't need saviors, thank you. And that idea of coming to sitting down for a true collaboration with people that If you think you are saving someone or trying to help them out of some kind of situation, and I'll just leave it at that, that power base is just always going to be problematic. And to think stronger about how we can amplify, witness and document and amplify, and I think it was what a big crowd needed to hear.
Thank you.
I saw so many examples of media from a lot of the presenters that showcase young people speaking their own voices about what matters to them. And I think for me, a big takeaway is don't be afraid to co-produce or provide a space for young people to produce their own content. They have so much exciting, transformative things to say. And I just think the more we can all provide those spaces and tools and partners and work with partners that already have the trust with young people in the community to leverage our platform to amplify their voice, the better.
Make use of time. Carolyn from WPSU and Nat, your Amplify Common Messages was just a recurring theme I thought of in our world of Mr. Rogers. And he always said, great stories simply told. And that's something that we all embrace still in today's world and can do so as co-creators or collaborators with different partners. So just wanted to amplify your message.
I think we are probably at wrap up. Do you have anything you want to conclude with? Or?
I have tons of things written on this pad, but I'm not gonna say. I maybe want to go back to something that Pat said in the very beginning, which is, and I've forgotten this person's name in part because I couldn't see her face because of the lights, but it was the second to last comment. Kind of this frame shift that you all have made from, and I think you said outreach to engagement. I'd love at some point to, in a personal conversation with whoever would like to educate me on that, hear more about that. I mean, that sounds like a super important and kind of, okay, and foundational shift. And I guess my question would be, and we don't have to answer this, I'll just kind of throw it out there as something maybe to think about, is whether that's been a kind of internal strategic frame shift, or whether that's been an external, apparent, explicit, again and again and again, driving it home in everything that you do out into the world frame shift. Because I think you're onto something really important, and I think it actually resonates with a lot of what people have said throughout the day. Seems very important for folks to think and talk about.
The two words are very interesting. One is actually patronizing. And at the time, you use it, and still some groups use that today, outreach. And it sounds so full of good intentions. We're going to reach out to help the disadvantaged understand or share what we have without asking them if they even want it. And then engagement, which is much harder. We're going to try to figure out how we can engage with you, and that's what innovation is all about. So when we heard about the Ohio collaboration, and as Deb said, we were there for this extraordinary initiative and event and partnership, they didn't gloss over the hard work that really each station had to invest. They had to engage with one another. So as we move from outreach, which is really, in my opinion, an outdated concept because it assumes that one group has the answers and the other is just waiting for some sort of eureka moment to be handed to them, and really figure out what partnership means, which is very difficult. So within CPB, what I never wanted to happen with this forum is that we bring wonderful speakers, and we are outreaching within the forum. The fact is, we choose these speakers because we want to change CPB internally, because we want to focus on engagement within CPB throughout our different departments instead of this top-down, really concept that doesn't really work anymore. So we can talk about all the negative aspects of technology, but one of the great things about technology is at the same time it can be negative. Everyone has their own megaphone, and everyone has ideas, and it's almost as if everybody has been waiting to engage. So for us to ignore this is at our peril. But it isn't enough to use the word engagement, because the more we talk about it, similar to innovation, it becomes meaningless. So we have to, I think, do a deep dive and understand what are we talking about. Partnerships are not easy. It's much easier to say, here's what I want to do, I'm going to do it, you're going to receive it, and you'll be better off in the end. But it just doesn't work that way anymore. So I think public media's relevancy is connected to how well we listen and to get out of our comfort zone. They call it a comfort zone because it's comfortable and it feels good. And it feels like a nice warm blanket. I know what I think, I know what I'm going to do, and I don't want any other information to change my mind. So anything that we're presenting here, we're struggling with within CPB at the same time. So I feel we're in this engaging partnership with each of you. And when we first heard Nat, I think Deb and I, and maybe Stephanie, were at an America's Promise Alliance event. And you were talking about how people in their comfort zone feel certain things very strongly. And you showed that clip about independence, the American way. And when people fail, it's their fault because they're not strong enough. And everybody has problems. And if you talk about stress, you're weak. And we talked about when you take that concept away, what replaces it? So dialogue and engagement, things that David Isay is trying to do through One Small Step, Tim is doing, Nat, and Nina's wonderful, wonderful, dynamic, engaging presentation. We're on the cusp of all of this. And I think together, because we do have this incredible evergreen mission, we're going to figure it out because you want to. And that's what I've learned. This is probably oversharing. My biggest worry when I left the State Department was that I would never find a team as smart or mission-focused as the one I worked with all over the world. I have a better team than I had at State, and you are all part of that team. And I have seen us change together and embrace innovation in uncomfortable ways sometimes. So I hope we have a much longer relationship with you, Nat, whether you want it or not. Hello?
Do I have to respond right now?
Just say yes.
Yes, yes,
and
yes.
With Tim and with Sarah, who you'll meet tonight. So thank you, all of you, today.
All right. All right, that seems like a perfect way to end our day. So we have a reception beginning at 6 p.m. this evening, so we look forward to seeing you there. And it's followed by dinner with our special speaker, Sarah Smarsh. So we look forward to seeing you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you all.